The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Mara Whitaker opened it at the kitchen table while her 2 children ate breakfast. She read it once. Then again. The bank wanted to discuss the farm loan. That never meant anything good. Her 70-acre property had been struggling for years. The old farmhouse needed repairs. The irrigation system leaked. The tractor was 15 years old. And the duck operation she'd started as a side business was barely paying its own expenses. The letter confirmed what Mara already knew. The bank wanted a meeting. Her neighbor Earl Dawson had already given her his opinion. Sell all, there's still something to sell. Mara hated hearing it. But she couldn't deny the numbers. The farm was losing money. By noon, Mara was walking through the duck yard. Nearly 600 ducks moved around the ponds and shelters. White pecans, khaki Campbells, a few Indian runners. They were noisy, messy, and surprisingly expensive. But Mara loved them. She had started raising ducks after discovering that local restaurants were willing to pay more for duck eggs than ordinary chicken eggs. At first, it had worked. Then feed prices rose. Competition increased. And the local market became saturated. Mara's customers were buying fewer eggs. She had more production than she could sell. Eggs filled the refrigerated storage room. Some went to neighbors. Some went to farmers' markets. And some had to be processed into other products before they spoiled. Nathan Briggs looked at the inventory one afternoon. "We have a problem." Mara sighed. "I know." "How many?" He checked the records. "Almost 1,400. Mara stared at the crates. "That's too many." Then Mara noticed something. The eggs were different. Not visibly. But when she compared the yolks, she saw deeper color in some batches. The shells were thick. The eggs held up remarkably well during transportation. She wondered whether the problem wasn't the eggs. Maybe it was the market. She had been trying to sell premium duck eggs to people who didn't particularly need them. So she started asking a different question. Who actually wanted them? Mara called chefs. Most said no. Some already had suppliers. Others didn't use enough duck eggs. Then she called specialty bakeries. A pastry chef in Baton Rouge expressed interest. He asked for samples. Mara shipped 2 dozen. A week later, he called. "These are excellent." Mara smiled. "Thank you. Where are you located?" "Outside Mercy Creek." There was a pause. "Missouri." "Yes." "Would you be able to supply us regularly?" Mara sat up. "How regularly?" "Every week." That was the first serious order she'd received in months. It wasn't enough to save the farm, but it proved something. Someone farther away was willing to pay for what her neighbors didn't want. Mara began studying the specialty food market. She discovered that chefs and pastry makers valued consistency more than simply having cheap eggs. They wanted reliable size, clean shells, stable supply, proper packaging, and predictable delivery. Mara changed her operation. She separated the ducks into smaller groups, tracked production by flock, improved nesting areas, changed lighting schedules, adjusted feed, and most importantly, she began grading every egg. The best eggs went to premium customers. Others stayed in local markets. Nothing was wasted. Then she found something unexpected. A restaurant group in New Orleans was looking for a reliable duck egg supplier. Mara nearly ignored the inquiry. New Orleans was hundreds of miles away. Shipping fragile eggs that far sounded impossible. But Nathan convinced her to answer. At least find out what they want. Mara called. A purchasing manager named Camille LeBlanc explained that several restaurants wanted duck eggs for specialty dishes. "We've had trouble finding consistent supply." Mara asked, "How many do you need?" Camille gave her a number. Mara nearly dropped the phone. "Every week." "Yes." "That's a lot. Can you do it?" Mara looked through the window toward the duck yard. "We might." The logistics were complicated. Eggs had to be collected frequently, cleaned carefully, graded, packed in protective cartons, stored at the correct temperature, then transported overnight. Mara contacted a regional carrier. The shipping cost was high, too high. She needed a better system. So she experimented. She redesigned packaging, used molded protective inserts, reduced empty space, improved labeling, and negotiated a regular shipping schedule. The first shipment to New Orleans contained 480 duck eggs. Mara watched the truck disappear down the road. She didn't know whether any of them would arrive intact. The next morning, Camille called. Mara answered immediately. "How many broke?" "None." Mara froze. "None." "Not one." Mara smiled. Camille continued. "And the chefs loved them." That was the moment everything changed. Within a month, orders increased. The New Orleans restaurants wanted more. Then a bakery joined them. Then another. Mara began sending larger shipments. The farm's refrigerated storage room finally emptied. The ducks couldn't lay eggs fast enough. Mara expanded the flock carefully. But she didn't want to repeat the same mistake. She wouldn't produce more than she could sell. Every additional duck had to have a market. Every shipment had to be profitable. Every customer had to be reliable. Earl noticed the trucks. One afternoon, he stopped at the gate. "Where are those eggs going?" Mara smiled. "Louisiana." He stared at her. "Louisiana. New Orleans." Earl laughed. "You're shipping duck eggs halfway across the country?" "Not halfway. Close enough." Mara shrugged. "They're buying them." Earl looked toward the refrigerated loading area. "How many?" "More every month." His expression changed. "You actually found buyers?" Mara nodded. "Turns out the problem wasn't the ducks." Earl smiled. "What was it?" "The people I was selling to." The bank meeting was scheduled for the following week. Mara walked into the office with 3 months of sales records. The loan officer expected to discuss selling the property. Instead, Mara placed the documents on his desk. "I'd like to restructure the loan." He looked confused. "You've been struggling." "I was." "What changed?" Mara opened another folder. New Orleans. The officer looked at the numbers. Then again. Her revenue was rising. Orders were contracted. The farm's losses were shrinking. The duck operation was becoming its most profitable division. He leaned back. "How confident are you that these orders will continue?" Mara answered honestly. "Not confident." "Then why stay?" Mara looked out the window. "Because for the first time, I know what the farm is capable of." The officer didn't respond. But he kept reading. Back home, Mara walked through the duck yard at sunset. The flock crowded around the feeding area. Lily ran toward her. "Mom." "What?" "There's another truck." Mara looked toward the road. A refrigerated delivery truck was pulling into the farm. Nathan stepped out. "We've got another order." Mara smiled. "How big?" Nathan held up the paperwork. "Double the last one." Mara stared at the number. Then toward the hundreds of ducks moving across the pond. The farm wasn't saved yet, but it was no longer dying. And the next shipment to New Orleans would determine whether Mara's strange little duck operation could become the business that finally pulled the entire farm back from the edge. The second New Orleans shipment left before sunrise. Mara stood beside the refrigerated truck while Nathan checked every carton. 480? 960, Nathan replied. Mara looked at him. Almost 1,000 eggs. Double the last order. She nodded. This time, she wasn't nervous about whether the eggs would arrive intact. She was nervous about something else. Whether the restaurants would keep buying them. The farm couldn't survive on one good month. It needed consistency. The truck disappeared down the gravel road. Mara returned to the duck barns. Her operation had changed dramatically in just a few months. The ducks were separated into manageable flocks. Nesting areas were cleaner. Egg collection happened several times a day. Every egg was inspected and graded. Premium eggs were packed separately. Lower-grade eggs remained available for local customers and food processing. Nothing was thrown away unnecessarily. Mara had also started tracking exactly how much each shipment cost. Feed, labor, packaging, cooling, transportation. She wanted to know the real profit, not just the sales number. Nathan appreciated that. "You've finally become an accountant." Mara laughed. "Don't insult me." Then came the phone call. Camille from New Orleans was on the line. "We want to increase the order." Mara leaned against the kitchen counter. "How much?" 2,000 eggs a week. Mara was silent. Camille continued. "We're adding 3 more restaurants." Mara looked through the window. The ducks were scattered around the pond. 2,000 eggs every week was no longer a side business. It was a serious operation. "I can do that," Mara said. But after hanging up, she immediately called Nathan. "We need a plan." They expanded carefully. Mara added more nesting boxes, improved the pond drainage, built a larger refrigerated storage room, installed better washing and grading equipment. She hired 2 part-time workers from town. But she didn't simply increase the flock. Instead, she first calculated how many ducks were needed to meet the contracts. Then she added them gradually. Mara had learned her lesson. Production without customers had nearly destroyed the farm. Now every new duck had a purpose. The 3rd shipment went out. Then the 4th. Then the 5th. The restaurants began sending photographs. Duck eggs appeared in elegant pastries, soufflés, fresh pasta, custards, specialty breakfast dishes. Mara saved every photograph. Lily loved looking at them. People in New Orleans are eating our eggs. Mara smiled. They are. That's crazy. A little. One photograph caught Mara's attention. It showed a famous pastry chef holding one of her eggs beside a tray of golden pastries. The restaurant had posted the image online. Within days, customers began asking where the eggs came from. Orders increased again. Then a specialty grocery store contacted Mara. They wanted packaged duck eggs for retail customers. Mara had to laugh. The farm had gone from struggling to sell eggs locally to having more buyers than it could currently supply. But Mara refused to rush. She remembered the years of debt. The broken tractor. The empty market stalls. The bank letter. She wasn't going to rebuild the same fragile business. So she created contracts carefully. Customers received dependable deliveries. The farm maintained emergency inventory. Transportation routes were optimized, and a percentage of every month's revenue went directly toward debt reduction. The farm became stronger instead of simply busier. 6 months later, Mara walked into the bank again. The same loan officer greeted her. He looked at the updated financial statements. You've paid down a significant portion of the loan. Mara nodded. And revenue? Still growing. He smiled. I suppose you're not interested in selling anymore. Mara laughed. Not even close. He closed the folder. Then congratulations. Mara stood. Thank you. As she walked outside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. Not because the farm had suddenly become rich. Because it finally had direction. Earl Dawson visited that afternoon. He stood beside the loading dock watching workers pack duck eggs. So this is the famous New Orleans operation. Mara smiled. You've heard about it? Everybody has. Earl picked up a carton. How far are these going? New Orleans. Still. Every week. He shook his head. I laughed when you kept the farm. Mara looked at him. I remember. I thought you'd lose everything. I almost did. Earl nodded. That's why I'm glad you didn't. He looked toward the duck pond. How many eggs now? Mara smiled. Enough. That's not a number. It's the right one. By the end of the year, Mara's duck eggs were being sold through restaurants, bakeries, and specialty markets across several states. New Orleans remained her biggest destination. The farm's debt had been dramatically reduced. The old irrigation system was finally replaced. The farmhouse roof was repaired. The barns were renovated. And Mara could finally afford to plan beyond the next month's bills. But she kept the original letter from the bank. She framed it. Not because she enjoyed remembering the fear. Because it reminded her how close she had come to giving up. One evening, Mara sat beside the pond with Lily. Hundreds of ducks moved through the golden water. Lily watched them quietly. Mom. Yeah. Why did everybody want you to sell? Mara thought for a moment. Because the farm wasn't making enough money. But now it is. Yes. Because of the ducks? Mara smiled. Partly. What else? Mara looked across the property. The ducks were always here. She pointed toward the barns. The eggs were always valuable. Then toward the road. We just hadn't found the right people to sell them to. Lily nodded. So New Orleans saved the farm? Mara smiled. Not exactly. She put an arm around her daughter. We saved it by refusing to stop looking for a way forward. The next morning, another refrigerated truck arrived. Mara stood beside the loading dock as workers carried cartons inside. She checked the labels. New Orleans. Again. She watched the truck leave. The same road that once carried away broken equipment and unpaid bills was now carrying thousands of duck eggs toward restaurants and markets hundreds of miles away. Mara looked back at the farm. The ponds were full. The barns were busy. The fields were green. The children were laughing. And the farm she had been told to sell was finally paying its way. She hadn't discovered some magical breed of duck. She hadn't found a secret fortune buried beneath the property. She had simply asked a better question. Instead of asking, who around here wants my eggs? She asked, who, somewhere else, would value what I have? That question changed everything.